What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I'm going to be bringing you a different type of video that I haven't done for a while. Today I'm going to be bringing you the ultimate hand trap guide for this current format. This is going to be post Justice Hunters, and I am going to be taking into account what could happen in an upcoming Forbidden and Limited list after Worlds, which is going to be next week. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be taking you through 15 of the most commonly talked about, if not used or even considered, hand traps for the main deck and or side deck. I'll talk through how each one of them is going to be effective against the main meta deck, and I'll also consider some of the other decks that might be flowing around in the competitive scene. So those particular decks we're going to be talking about are going to be the 3 brand new Justice Hunters decks in the form of Yummies, K9 variants, and of course Dracotal variants, alongside the current existing meta being Malice, Mitsurugi, Ryzeal, Fiendsmith variants, and then also talk about Blue Eyes and Lunar Lights because they kind of incorporate a little bit more of the player base as well under that other category. So, with all of that out of the way, if you find this video helpful and you want to see more videos like this, make sure you smash the like button. Getting it above 50 likes in the first 24 hours will also unlock a breaker version of this as well, so we can talk about through what types of breakers are effective and how they're going to be utilized. So diving head first, the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to talk about the hand trap first, and we'll use that against all of the different decks, and then we'll move on to the next hand trap. So the first one is going to be probably the most common hand trap in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now, and that is going to be Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Now, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is a bit of a weird place. It's still very, very effective against certain cards, but the modernized decks now have the ability to play through quite a lot. The other big benefit of something like Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is that generically across the board, it is your counter to if anyone that activates a Mold Chummy against you, you have the ability to Ash to make sure that they don't draw huge amounts of advantage. So, when we are looking at specifically Yummy and how effective Ash Blossom is going to be. So with this one, I've kind of put this, and the 3 icons I'm going to be using are a green tick, a red X, and a grey meh kind of line. Now, what I mean by meh is it means that it's still a card you're probably going to be considering playing, but how effective it's going to be against Yummy is going to be the ultimate question. Now, there are some interactions you can utilize with this, like you can Ash Blossom the Cupsy Yummy, but the chances are if you Ash Blossom the Cupsy Yummy, you need to pair it off with another hand trap. Because what Cupsy Yummy is going to do is it's going to grab the Yummy Surprise, which can give them an ability to extend a little bit further. So even if you do Ash Blossom the Cupsy, they still might have the option of already opening up the extender that they were looking for. They're still going to go into Snatchy. They're still going to be able to present their field. Ash Blossom is not a turn ender in this scenario. Moving on to K9 variants. Now, K9 variants is always going to be a little bit different depending on what variant you are playing. So if we just look at directly what it can do against the K9s, one of the best ways you can utilize against the K9 is Azuna being able to send Lupus from the deck to the graveyard. If they can't get Lupus into rotation, that's going to cause them a couple of different issues in order to kind of get everything moving and ticking along. When you start to look at all the different variants, when you look at Vanquish Soul, Ash Blossom isn't massively effective, but it still can be quite useful by being able to Ash Blossom off the Raisin to make sure that they don't get to search that missing attribute. It could also be quite good against Holy Suitor Summon from the deck. That can really stump their players being able to extend their field that bit more. When you're looking at the Crystons, with Crystons you can actually start to affect the Sulphur Near and the Sulphur Door, because the Sulphur Door wants to be able to send from deck to grave, and the Sulphur Near want to be able to summon from the deck as well. You can also technically Ash Blossom the Tristanos, and that can really stop them kind of helping to build their synchro plays. So Ash can be a little bit more effective in the K9 variant matchup, which is why it's got a green tick rather than a grey midline. Let's take a look at Dracotals. Now, straight off the bat, just looking directly at the Dracotals, Ash Blossom is going to be very, very good, and the most ideal unit you're going to want to stop with Ash Blossom is going to be the Rahul Dragontail, as that is their technical brand of fusion, as a lot of people like to call it, because that's going to allow them to use fusion material from the deck and the hand in order to go into a Dracotail fusion monster. The other big benefit of something like an Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs is actually one of your negates to their trap cards. Because both of their trap cards put a card from the graveyard back into deck and then draw a card, you're actually able to Ash Blossom them because they actually draw the card all part of the one effect. So that can be really, really important to stop those trap cards either negating a spell or returning one of your monsters from the, or a tap position monster to be specific, from the field to the hand. So that is why with the Dracotals, I'm going to be giving it a good old green tick. Now let's look at Malice. So Malice is one of the old Bridemaid deck, and what I mean by that is, yes, it has won some regionals and some big events, like what I believe it won the Nationals in France. So the deck is still very, very good. And I feel it's one of these decks that right now a lot of people kind of sleep on. There are still people that are worried about it, which is why you do see Artifact Lancia still being in some people's side decks. But then there are people that are a little bit less reliant on it for the pure fact that they don't think Malice is going to be as highly represented. So if they're looking to try and dodge some of those, they might consider those free spaces in their extra deck to take away the Artifact Lancia. That being said, when we're looking at just Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, I feel that there is just too many ways that the deck can play through it. So when you're looking at stuff like White Binder, that's probably like one of your best ways to Ash Blossom, because when it comes back from the banished zone to the field, they draw a card, and that can be very, very damaging for them because it means they don't get that link free back in rotation. That being said, quite like with the Yummy matchup, it's one of them cards where you need to be able to utilize it in its best possible scenarios in order to get everything going. So White Binder is probably the best place to use it. It's probably where you look at being a grey section rather than a red section. But I've kind of put it as a cross, and only what I mean by that is, unless you're massively worried about a Molchummy, you might even consider siding out the Ash Blossoms, and the same can be said about Yummy. So really, when you're looking at Yummies and Malice, you can either see them as a grey meh, or you can see them as a red X. It kind of serves the same purposes. It doesn't have as many targets to really stop and really hit like you do with the Dracotals and the K9s. Now, obviously, I'm not rating how effective a Ash Blossom is going to be in a main deck against the Chummies, because I think everyone's going to have those. I'm going to be looking specifically at the cards that you can affect with that particular Ash Blossom. So Ash Blossom can be quite useful a little bit more in Yummy with some of the other components they want to try and search, whereas when you are looking at Malice, there is really going to be that White Binder, and keeping that White Binder stuck banished can be quite helpful for you, but other than that, you're not really going to get the most advantage out of the back of it. Now let's move on to Mitsurugi Raizel. Now there are two very important kind of points that you might want to use your Ash Blossom on. The first one is going to be the Habakuri, because the Habakuri will summon a monster from the deck and then tribute it off, and Habakuri can only be activated once per duel. So if you do Ash Blossom it, that will stop it being activated for the rest of the turn and they don't gain an advantage. The big downside of that one is if they are on the Raizel variant, they know that their Duo Drive will then resolve. So Duo Drive is another one of them factors that, again, you need to kind of pair Ash Blossom up with another hand trap to get the maximum amount of value from it. But if you are going to be targeting any particular cards in either the Mitsurugi strategy or the Raizel strategy, you're probably going to be using your Ash Blossom for something like a Duo Drive or a Habakuri. The only time the Ash Blossom will not be effective against Duo Drive is if they do have Raizel Cross already in the field zone, because then they may take that ability to negate it and go from there. And even then, Duo Drive is not being lent on as heavily as it previously once was. So for this one, it is still a green tick, because being able to stop the Habakuri and the Duo Drive can really, really slow down your opponent's resources. And there are ways that when Sword wants to try and search, you can be quite effective at that point. But it's not going to be a total game ender, but it does have more cards in its overall strategy that if you're hitting it with Ash Blossom, you're going to get more advantage from it than if you were to do it against your Yummies or the Malice. Moving on to moving on to the Fiendsmith variants. Now, Fiendsmith variants, what I'm kind of considering into this one is whether you want to be considering like Dracotal Fiendsmith. It's just overall the Fiendsmith engine, so like Mementos as well. Where would you specifically hit the Fiendsmith kind of element? Where does the Fiendsmith kind of lead to? The Fiendsmith element is trying to lead to Caesar. It's basically going to be your overall nib check. And the cards that you can kind of really target with an Ash Blossom in a Fiendsmith variant is going to be stuff like your Requiem, Track, and Engraver. Now, most people will wait for the Requiem, but the biggest downside of that one is by treating off the Requiem more times than not, you may already have an Engraver in rotation. If you want to hit the Track, that just stops them getting access to Lurry, discarding the Lurry and summoning it back. But from my experience, 99.99999% of the time, they hard open up the Lurry and they just go, cool, normal summon, and off they go. So there are a couple of places where you can hit the Fiendsmith element itself, but then when you are taking into account stuff like Mementos, being able to hit some of the Memento cards when they're trying to tribute to someone from the deck, like the Witch or the Darkblade, can also be very, very important, and that's where you're going to get a little bit more effectiveness from it, which is why I'm going to be giving it an overall green tick. Then moving into Blue Eyes. Now, Blue Eyes is less so one of them, like Ash Blossom isn't going to be a bit of a game ender, but Ash Blossom will allow your opponent to neg cards. And what I mean by that is, one of the most effective points to Ash Blossom is rather than Ash Blossoming on something like the opponent's Sage when they're trying to search out a level 1, because again, 99.999% of the time, they already have opened up the Maiden. One of the best ways to stop them getting access to resources or making sure that they have to discard a card, so they're going to go neg 2 if you do Ash Blossom it, is more times than not going to be the Wishes for Eyes of Blue. Because when you hit that, like I said, they have to discard as cost, so they're already going to be down 2 cards, and you've traded your 1 Ash Blossom for 2 of their cards. Yes, that means that they still have the ability of Sage of Eyes of Blue to go off and then work its way into Maiden, so it's not going to end their turn. But again, with all of these other examples here, what you're doing is you're trying to trade 1 card for one of their strongest either consistency pieces or one of their strong protection pieces or anything else like that. So against Blue Eyes, I'm giving it a good old green tick. Now against Lunalight is a bit more of them tricky ones, and you'll see that throughout both of the videos that I'm going to be doing if you do get this video for the breakers and the rest of these hand traps, is that Lunalights are one of them very, very important underdog decks. And the way that I'm trying to treat Blue Eyes and Lunalights as the other style of decks is Lunalights have a very direct way of playing. They're a very combo heavy deck, but what they're trying to end on is a little bit different to everything else on this list, is they're trying to end on a towers. Now you've got to be very, very careful with towers in this current format, because there are decks like the Yummies, like the K9s, and of course like the Dracotals that will struggle to out a towers on the level of Lunalight Liger Dancer that basically says it's unaffected by everything apart from Lunalights. The exact same with Super Quantal Great King Magnus. It's one of them ones that is going to be unaffected, even though the Great Magnus has another layer, because it basically says you can't add cards from the deck to the hand. It can be very, very damaging. So when you're looking at something like Ash Blossom, again, you need to pair it off with something else. It can be quite effective for you, but the biggest downside is with the Lunalight strategy, they have a lot to keep going. They like to utilize their graveyard a lot. They do like to send cards from deck to the grave, and probably the best thing to interact with would be the Silver Hound from the graveyard. And even then, the Silver Hound gives them a special summon. It means they don't even need to use their normal summon, and they still have plays to make. So with that being said, it's one of them ones that's going to be a grey meh. Quite like the argument of Malice, quite like the argument of Yummies as well, is that they will just have so much more to push on with, that the Ash Blossom, in comparison to the other stuff, it doesn't make them neg cards. It doesn't mean that they're going to be down advantage. It doesn't mean that they're going to lose one of their strongest cards that sets them up with a Fusion Monster plus a Return 1 plus set 2 cards from the deck. So that's where you're just shutting off so much advantage from that one particular Ash Blossom. And in the other scenario of Lunalight, you're not really getting that maximum amount of advantage. So let's move on to the second hand trap on this one. So this one is going to be Ghost Belle. Now Ghost Belle is going to be a little bit more effective this format in my overall opinion, and you'll start to see the difference between the top line and the bottom line, or the Ash Blossom line and then the Ghost Belle line. Because with the Ash Blossom line, where it has a bit more of an average balance against most decks and every other deck that isn't listed here, the Ghost Belle is going to be a little bit more specific and a little bit more tailored to very, very specific cards in these particular strategies. So when we're going to be looking at Yummies, I'm just going to jump straight ahead. It's going to get a big old fat green tick. The reason it's going to get a big old fat green tick is Ghost Belle is actually really, really good against the Synchro monsters and of course against Snatchy. Because Snatchy wants to revive from the graveyard, as well as the ability of the Synchros. They want to tag themselves out, put them back into the extra deck, and then they want to summon 2 monsters back from the graveyard. So again, quite like Ash Blossom trading a 1 for a 2, you're still technically trading physically a 1 for a 1, but you're also stopping your opponent getting those 2 cards back to the field that can give them more materials. It's still going to be very, very useful, very, very effective. And it's one of them ones where if you had to choose specifically because you were only going to face Yummy for the entire day, would you choose to play Ash Blossom or Belle? You might feel a little bit more confident by being able to hit more effectively with a Ghost Belle than an Ash Blossom. I'm not saying that's exactly what you're going to do, because Ash Blossom is still overall the better generic hand trap, but it's just one of them ones where the Ghost Belle can put in a lot of work for you. Moving on to the K9 strategies. Now again, the K9 strategies have a lot of effective weaknesses against something like a Ghost Belle. So one of the main core opponents for the K9s will be something like the Lupus. So whether they want to use Lupus during your turn or whether they're trying to revive it during their turn, being able to stop that coming back from the graveyard can be very, very important, because once they get that on the field during your turn, they have that quick effect to Xyz using that Lupus. So being able to stop that card coming back from the grave can be very, very important. And it's one of the ones that if you see an Ash Blossom in the hand or a Ghost Belle in the hand, the Ghost Belle will be just as effective to stop that Lupus access one way or another. Other cards you can kind of consider as well is you've got the Sulfured Near that comes back from the graveyard, so being able to stop that coming back from the graveyard and discarding the card can be very, very important. You've also got the Tristanos effect from the graveyard that I believe you can stop with Ghost Belle. There's also other banish effects that can be very, very useful in the overall K9 strategies. The Crystron version of the strategy. The biggest downside would be something more along the lines of the Vanquish Soul version. And the reason for that one is that the only card that really does want to move stuff from the graveyard would be specifically stuff like the Vanquish Soul Rock, which still can be quite useful if they do get a Borga to the graveyard and they're trying to loop that attribute back to the hand. Being able to Ghost Belle it can be very, very important, because that stops them getting that attribute in rotation, and unless they've already pre-expected a Ghost Belle, they might not have the correct attributes in the hand in order to reveal for the rest of their effects. So, as you can imagine, for the K9s and Ghost Belles, it's a big fat green tick. Moving on to Dracotals. Now, the biggest benefit with something like the Dracotals is quite like the Ash Blossom, Ghost Belle could be used to stop the trap cards. That's very, very important, because I feel that when they're ending their turn, more times than not, the Dracotals will be ending with a Arfleon, which would more times than not be chain blocked, because they'll be blocking it with the trap card, with the fusion materials to set cards from the deck, which means they can't be Ghost Belled. But if you do then also consider it, you do have Artheon if it is the only effect. Very, very rare that will ever be the case when it's trying to target from the graveyard. But more commonly than not, you're actually going to be looking at the Yugioh, because the Yugioh will want to put itself back to the deck and then add the Fey Mana from the grave back to the hand, and you can stop that. And then you're stopping the 2 trap cards quite like Ashland as well. So it can be very, very effective when you know those particular points you want to be targeting and stopping. Not being mentioned as well that if they are starting to use other particular variants of the deck, they want to try and move cards from the graveyard, like a Cartasia trying to come back from the grave to the hand. Ghost Spell can be quite helpful as well to leave that material in the grave, because the one very important thing about the Dracotales is making sure that they can maintain their resource, which is why more times than not the Artheon is actually going to be returning resource from the graveyard to the hand rather than returning monsters on the field to the hand. So, for the Dracotales and Ghost Spells, a big fat green tick. Now, when we're going to be looking at the next one, speaking about Malice, again, this is where Ghost Spell can still be semi-effective. Like, the card you might want to consider trying to stop with this one will be GWC, when they're trying to bring one of the monsters back from the banish or the grave. But then also you might want to be considering stopping the March Hare that wants to try and target a card in the graveyard and banish it. If they are on the Bestial version, of course, that is another way that you can target it, but I'll see the Bestials a little bit later on this hand trap-esque element. So when it does come down to the Malice cards, it does have a little bit more effectiveness than Ash Blossom, just because it will hit a couple more cards in generic, like the GWC, if that's still being utilized, as well as the ability to use your opponent's March Hare. So on this one, it will get a grey Myth sign, and the reason for that one is, again, it's not one that I'd be specifically putting in against Malice. It's one of them hand traps that you would very easily sacrifice. Like, if I'm main decking Ghost Spell because I expect my environment to be predominantly Justice Hunter's deck, so like the K9s, the Yummies, and the Feymanas, and I end up facing Malice, I'll be taking out the Ghost Spell going into game 2, and that's an open, easy spot for Artifact Lancers. Moving into the Habakiri, the Mitsurugis and the Raizios. Now, the biggest thing that you could probably hit with your Ghost Spell will be something like the Murakumo, because the Murakumo is going to want to come back to the field and then utilize its Raigeki-esque effect to destroy your cards. There are also effects with like the Ritual Spell being able to try to be recycled back from the hand by the Mitsurugi monsters. When you're looking at your Raizios, the best thing about that is probably Cross, because Cross wants to move cards from the graveyard. But even then, it's not overall graveyard. You're trying to add cards back to the hand or back to the field. So Ghost Spell overall isn't as effective as it probably could be against both of those strategies. The biggest benefit of it, and that's why I'm going to be giving it a grey meh rather than a red cross, is to stop that Murakumo and is to stop the recycle of the Ritual Spell. It's not going to end their turn, and quite like with Malice, it's one of them cards that I'd be siding out personally if I'm going to be going into it with game 2 and I do end up facing them. It's not one that I feel is an absolute staple, but it's also one of the ones that I would want to know where they could be of effect for me if I do open them up game 1, how I can kind of deal with those particular cards, and then judge from that perspective onwards how effective I feel they're going to be in that matchup. Moving on to Fiendsmith variants, actually Fiendsmith variants probably do struggle a little bit quite more against the Ghost Spells, quite like everything else. And the reason for that one is Engraver wants to move cards from the graveyard. You've got Lacrima that wants to move cards from the graveyard. You've also got Lurry that wants to come back from the graveyard. Being able to kind of like block those off and stop those resources happening can be very, very effective. Now, I'm not saying that's the best use of it, because when we do look at other cards later on in this particular video, there'll be cards where you just remove them from the graveyard all completely, and that'll be more effective than a Ghost Spell, because the Ghost Spell still leaves that material in the graveyard so that it can be utilized again the next turn, unless the card has spun a particular target back for cost, and then you're burning away their resource a little bit, but you'd still much rather let them spin a card back for cost and then DD Crow it or Bestial it. So Ghost Spell is still very, very effective, which is why it's going to get an overall green tick against the Fiendsmith variants than anything else. You can also look at like Mementos when they're trying to utilize their Memento Fusion or anything like that to try and banish from the graveyard. It can be very, very effective to kind of slow them down and stop that element being utilized. Moving into Blue Eyes now, with Blue Eyes it's a little bit more of a grey area, no pun intended, and the reason for that one is, when you're looking at Ghost Spell, the most effective thing you can do is stop the Maiden coming back from the graveyard, and you can stop the Spirit Link 1 from trimming itself off to bring back a Blue Eyes from the graveyard, if that is specifically where they're trying to revive from. More times than not, players, if they expect you to have Ghost Spell, will probably play around them, and I don't think it's the overall best way to stop it. So again, quite like with the Mitsurugi Raizios and the Malice, if I was facing Blue Eyes and I was main decking Ghost Spell, it'd be one of the cards I'd be quite happy just to side out and not really feel that it's that impactful. But it's also not a card that has no effect if I was to be going first against this or in game 1 and see the Ghost Spell. So with that being said, Blue Eyes is going to get a grey meh. Moving on to Loonlights now, Loonlights is a bit of a different option when it does take into account Ghost Spell. Now again, quite like Ash Blossom, they will have more cards that they can push through with, and they will have ways that it's not just going to be Ghost Spell, that's it, turn over. That being said, when you do look at some of the other cards that they want to utilize, more of the cards want to banish from the graveyard, and that's really how they're going to set up their Liger Dancer, because they need the Leoheart. They need the other fusion monster in the graveyard. Yes, they're going to be able to send it from the extra deck to the graveyard as cost, but when they're trying to utilize their fusion spells, whether it be the Lunalight Wolf, whether that be heavy pulverization, heavy pulverization from the hand, but anytime you want to be banishing from the graveyard, when they're trying to activate a spell like that, you can just go Ghost Spell, and straight away that will stop it. Now, obviously, it's not going to be as effective if your opponent is going to be working down the 2 Lunalight Liger Dancer combo, because at the end of the day, they're putting 2 on the field. And again, that's when you need to combo off your Ghost Spell with another form of interaction or another form of removal to deal with those. But only if you're facing Lunalights, what you want to be doing the best as you possibly can is stopping them getting access to their Liger Dancer, because more times than not, if they do that, it's game over. So that being said, quite like with Ash Blossom, they just have so much resource that they can push through, but if you're able to combo off your Ghost Spell with another hand trap, you might have just enough to stop them going, and arguably you can consider the Grey Mare as a green tick, because it's still a very, very effective card in my opinion. Moving swiftly on into Ghost Reaper. Now, Ghost Reaper is a very interesting one, because there will be decks you'll get more advantage from when there are decks that are playing 3 of particular cards, but then you'll also get more effective if it is only a 1 of that your opponent is allowed to play, which we'll see that as we go through it. So very quickly, very easily against Yummies, I still feel that I'm going to be giving this, or I say I still feel, I am going to be giving this a green tick. Now, the reason I'm going to give this a green tick is you will take out all 3 Snatchy Yummies. The downside of that one is if an opponent is prepared for this, or if an opponent has the ability to do so, they actually can recycle all of those Snatchies from the banishment back into the extra deck, and they just get to go again. So it's not the biggest end-all, be-all, game over play. But it's one of the ones that if they're not prepared for it and they don't know the particular combo in order to recycle it, a Reaper could be very devastating. Now, when we're looking at the K9s again is a little bit of a weird one on this one. And the reason I say that is because no matter which variant you're going for, the only card you'd probably want to Reaper that you know 100% your opponent is playing is going to be the Ripper, which is still a good way to take it out. But if you're up against a Vanquished Souls, you could hit the Rock of the Vanquished, but the deck could theoretically play around it. It could also theoretically play through it, because then they just go, cool, we'll just use all of the other cards apart from Rock, and then you've already triggered my Ripper capability, or Azuna into Ripper, and that's going to give you everything you need. When you're looking at the Crystons just have so many different targets that the best thing you could possibly do with a Reaper would be Ripper. And even then, you then need to open up 2 spaces in your extra deck, because if you're going to be playing Reaper, the biggest downside is you then need to open up your extra deck massively, because you would need to definitely have a Snatchy in there, you would definitely need to have a Ripper in there, then you'd need to have something like an Arfleon in there as well, and we'll talk about it a little bit more as we go on, but you then pretty much, when you're looking at how varied the meta is, to utilize Reaper at its max potential, you're going to have like 5, 6, 7 particular individual targets that you're probably not even going to summon yourself. So, when it comes to K9s, I personally wouldn't be putting it in. Like, I would be happier using the 3 spaces that I would have for the Reaper to utilize 3 cards that would allow me to deal with the Ripper, or just stop my opponent getting to Ripper. Whether that be a DD Crow for the Lupus, whether that be a Ghost Bell for the Lupus, or an Ash Blossom, that's kind of something I'd be looking at a little bit more effectively. Moving on to Dracotals, so again, quite like the K9 variant of Vanquish Soul, where they're playing 3 Rock of the Vanquisher, Yummies where they're playing 3 of the Snatchy. With Dracotal, more times than not, they're going to be playing at the very least 2, if not 3 Arfleon, and if you're able to take them away straight away, that can be very devastating for them, because not only will they lose access to being able to get to one of their Dragon Tail monsters in the grind state, but you're taking away 3 cards from their extra deck that are going to allow them to regain their resource. So Reaper can actually be very devastating against the Dracotal variant, depending on what variant they have. Like if they're playing a K9 variant, they might be able to continue to push through it. If they're playing like a Regenesis version, if they're playing a Dole version, they will have alternative plays. But Arfleon is actually very, very core and very, very important. If you have the space in your extra deck and you are playing Reaper already, being able to take that Arfleon away from them can be very devastating. So that is going to get a big old green tick. Moving on to Malice. Now, not to spend too much time on the Malice just have a lot of one-offs, like they've got the Heart's Crypta, they've got the White Binder, but ultimately, because they're playing these little one-offs, there's not really one that you can specifically target, get rid of it, and they aren't able to play. Not to mention that they might have ways of being able to recycle their banishment sometimes they won't, but we've seen in the past that there'll be replays or plays online where people have banished the White Binder or got rid of the White Binder or kept the White Binder out of the way, and yet their opponent is still able to play their Malices. Yes, you could get rid of the Heart's Crypta, which is one of their attack options, but then they also fall back on Access Code Talker. So there's just too many individual targets that will allow them to push through and play. So overall, I'm going to be saying it's not even worth putting in for that one. I would much rather use that space for free Artifact Lancer than anything else. Moving on to Mitsurugi Raizel. Now, for the Mitsurugis, in theory, you could hit King of the Feral Imps, but if you hit the King of the Feral Imps, they might still have ways to get into their Mitsurugi engine anyway. Probably the card that is going to stand out the most is going to be hitting that Detonator. Yes, that can be very damaging because it means that their end field of the Mitsurugis is just going to be the Murakumo, but remember, there are pure Mitsurugis running around, so being able to try and Reaper a card that might not even exist or a deck that already knows how to play without a particular Detonator might not be the end-all be-all. And again, I feel that there are other cards you could consider that will be a little bit more effective to deal with that Detonator. Because remember, Reaper has to be played during your opponent's turn while they have more monsters than you do. So if they don't have more monsters than you do, or if you don't see Reaper in your opening hand, you're not going to be able to do anything. Whereas I'd much rather use those free spaces that the Reaper would take up for more effective cards that are like breakers that will be able to deal with that particular Detonator. So for that one, I'm just going to put meh. Yes, of course, you can take that Detonator out. It's not like the Malice one where they just have so many different options. Like taking away Detonator, which is pretty much a guaranteed end piece for the entire strategy, can still be damaging, but it's not an end-all be-all. Moving on to Fiends for Variants. Now, Fiends for Variants again get a little bit different. So against Memento, if you were to hit any of the big Memento fusions, not the Thunder Dragon, but if you get rid of the other one, that could be quite damaging for them because then they're trying to regain that resource. But then they do have ways of using those as fusion materials in the graveyard and putting them back into the deck. So they just get to go again. So they have very easy ways to recycle it. Of course, again, you can hit DDD High Wave King Caesar, you can hit Desiree if you want to, but more times than not, when you're hitting particular cards like that, they have the ability to recycle them. They also have the ability to maybe not even need to rely on them. And it's one of the ones where you would need to combo off a Reaper with a Nibiru. And ultimately, I just feel that I would much rather combo off a Nibiru with an Imperm than I would a Nibiru with a Reaper. So for that one, again, just a grey meh. Yes, of course, you can take out Caesar if you are feeling that it's going to be a massive, massive problem. But I feel you're probably going to be much better off putting in a card that's going to be a little bit more effective for you. For Blue Eyes White Dragon, there's probably only two targets on that one, which would be the Blue Eyes Link 1 Spirit and then the Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon. Now, the reason you would take both of those out or try to target both of those is the Blue Eyes Link 1 still allows your opponent to play. I know sometimes when you're looking at stuff like Kashtira Fenrir, you'll try and target the Blue Eyes Fusion monster, the Tyrant Dragon, because that's the one that can clear off all of your monsters. Yes, there is a benefit, but then Blue Eyes fall back on the Spirit Dragons, and the Spirit Dragons in this current format is still very, very good and very, very effective. So again, there's pros and cons on it. It's one of the ones that the benefit of something like a Kashtira Fenrir is it gets you to look at your opponent's extra deck, you put one face down banish, which is a lot harder to get back than just banishing it or sending it to the graveyard. So ultimately, I don't think it's a game ender, but I do feel that if you're able to take away two Spirit Dragons or two of the Link ones, it does make their play slightly more awkward. So it's one of the ones that if I had to play it, I would definitely give it a green tick as more effectiveness than the Mitsurugis, Malices, Canines, and the Fiendsmiths because there's less variety and I know exactly the two targets I want to go for. But ultimately, I don't think it's, again, one of them cards that I would want to put in. Like, unless I had specifically tailored my extra deck and I had no reason to use any of my extra deck bar maybe like one or two cards in there, then that's probably where Reaper becomes a little bit more effective for you. But again, you need to put it in, go in second, you need to guarantee you're going second. So unless you're playing a blind second version of the deck that you are playing that doesn't require an extra deck, that's when it gets a little bit more difficult. Lunalights, I don't need to spend much time on this one. Lunalights, you just hit the Liger Dancer. Yes, of course, they could fall back on the Leo Dancer, which means, in theory, you could also get rid of the Leo Dancer instead, and then they have no way to get to the Liger Dancer. But ultimately, you're just trying to stop them getting to it. So getting rid of the Liger Dancer, because you're going to rip both of them away, is really going to just like stop them getting access to the towers. They need to go out of their way to try and recycle them, and it does make it a little bit more awkward. The only difference with getting rid of the Liger Dancers is if they do play Panther Dancer, they could just make the Leo Dancer and still give you a bit of a hard time. But the Liger Dancer is pretty much their auto win con, get it on the field, and if you can't out it, they will win. So green tick to get rid of the Liger Dancer, but you do have some options to be worried about as well. Ghost Ogre. Now, Ghost Ogre is one of the ones that's very much up for contention. And what I mean by that is, it's one of the ones that in certain matchups, it's probably godly. In certain scenarios, it's probably godly. But as an overall arching hand trap, it's probably not as effective or outright as it possibly could be. Now, when we're trying to consider how effective it is in the Yummy matchup, it can be quite good because if the opponent activates Yummy Snatchy and you Ghost Ogre it, it then can't Synchro because it needs to use itself as material and it leaves the field. On top of that as well, as if you were able to Ghost Ogre the field spell minion, again, they lose that attack buff and they then need to find their way to recycling it, getting it back to the deck and then using it to place it directly from the deck again. Ghost Ogre being that benefit of being able to be utilized during your turn and through their turn means that you can stop them synchroing during your turn. You can also stop them synchroing during their turn. The one biggest thing that you do need to worry about is that if they do get Herald of the Art Light on the field, it's going to be a lot more awkward for you to try and stop getting access to them. Just going back to Ash Blossom very, very quickly, because I literally just forgot that I didn't even mention Obedience Schooled. But Obedience School can be ashed, which is absolutely fine. But remember, if you ash the Obedience School, it doesn't stop their plays. They still have plays to make. So it's not the end all be all. Anyway, Ghost Ogre, I still think it's really good against Yummy. It's probably one of them ones that is a little bit better and more effective, but it's not a game ender. It's not like the equivalent of hitting a True Light, which not only will a Ghost Ogre become a destruction of a spell and trap, but then becomes a destruction of your opponent's entire monster lineup. But it is one of them ones that you get rid of the minion, you get rid of their Snatchy, it really can stump their plans and make it a little bit more awkward for them to extend, unless they've already taken into account what a Ghost Ogre possibility, and then they can play through it a little bit more. Moving on to the Canine variants. Now, the Canine variants have a couple of interesting interactions. What I mean by that is, if you're looking at pure Canines, being able to hit the Lupus when it tries to quick effect to Xyz can be very, very important. You can also hit the Azuna when it tries to send from the deck to the grave, because what you're doing then is, if they do send the Lupus can still come back, and it will have that quick effect to go into a Typhon if they are playing it. When they bring the Lupus back and then use the quick effect to try and Xyz, then you Ghost Ogre it. They can still play around it, because technically they'll just leave the Lupus on the field and not try to Xyz with it, and then just hard Xyz with it during the next turn. Very rare that's going to happen unless they know or expect a Ghost Ogre. When you're looking at the Vanquish Soul lineup, being able to Ghost Ogre Erasing can be quite helpful, because not being allowing that to, even though it can return to the hand, it still gets destroyed and they still lose that attribute. It doesn't negate the effect of that monster, so they're still going to get the attribute that they want, but again, it makes it a little bit more awkward, because they'll lose that monster on the field, or they have to return it to the hand to get it back to the field. The exact same can be said about Holly Sue, and of course, that all-important, all-annoying Die Smasher. So if you are able to Ghost Ogre a Die Smasher, even if it has free materials, it won't be able to change the outcome of a die roll, so it does really come down to how good is the die roll going to be. So Ghost Ogre is still going to be very good. When you're looking at the Crystons, there are a couple of ways you can deal with it. Like, you could technically Ghost Ogre a Infinity. You could also Ghost Ogre a Tristanos when it tries to Synchro Summon. There are these different options that you can utilize against it. So it is going to be an effective card in most matchups, which is why a lot of people played this in their main deck for YCS Vancouver. So that's a big old green tick. I'm going to go quickly into Dracotales. So in my opinion, Dracotales, it really isn't worth playing at all. For the pure fact that more times than not, their Dracotales will be chain blocking. So you'll be chain blocking the Arfleon, which is one of the cards you could Ghost Ogre. You can't really Ghost Ogre their trap cards. There may or may not be some effects. Like, you could possibly Ghost Ogre Gamel, but even then, I don't think it's personally worth it. So it's one of the ones that if I'm maining it, I'd be very happy siding it out. And if I'm not, and it's in my side deck, I'm probably not going to be putting it against Dracotale. Moving on to the Malice, again, very quickly on this one, I don't think there is any ideal way to Ghost Ogre. Yes, you could Ghost Ogre Red Ransom, which is probably like the best place to Ghost Ogre. You could also Ghost Ogre like a Dormouse, but the chances are Dormouse is going to be banishing a White Rabbit anyway, so the White Rabbit's then going to come back to the field, so you're not actually gaining any advantage. And even then, when you're Ghost Ogre and stuff like that, White Binder, just try and get it off the field, more times than not, when they get to the decision of being able to utilize the White Binder, they still have the field spell to play. So you would need to wait for a lot of cards to be played through first and hold that Ghost Ogre very, very patiently to get any advantage from it. And honestly, I think it's one of the ones that you're just better off not having. And again, that's your space for Molchummy Meows if you want to play it, or of course, something more along the lines of a Artifact Lancia. Moving into the Mitsurugis. Now, the Mitsurugis on this one, the best kind of trade-off that you can get is if you were to Ghost Ogre a Detonator, because then they'll go Detonator effect, you go, cool, Ghost Ogre, and you're trading one for one. Again, quite like everything else, it's one of them ones where I feel you're probably going to be a little bit more effective utilizing a different hand trap in that scenario than you are for the Ghost Ogre. The other target it could deal with is the Murakumo, but then the Murakumo, as long as it gets tributed or can be revived from the grave by another means, it's not really going to make much of a difference, and they're still going to be able to Raigeki the field. So it's pretty much a meh. You're literally just trading Ghost Ogre for Detonator. That's really what you're coming down to. And again, one of the ones, if this card is in my side deck, I'm not putting it in against the Mitsurugi matchup. I'll probably put in something else that's going to be a little bit more effective for that direct trade-off. Moving into Fiendsmiths. Fiendsmiths is a bit of a weird one on this one as well. Like, I don't think there's anything that's really worth Ghost Ogre in. Like, in theory, you could Ghost Ogre the Lacrima on the field. There are a couple of memento points you could Ghost Ogre as well that burns away their resource, but then they just have so much resource to keep pushing through that they'll be able to move further forward. So, honestly, it's a bit more of a meh card. Like, there are a couple of points you could Ghost Ogre to get rid of their resources, but quite like the previous ones, it's a card that I wouldn't be siding in if it's in my side deck, and if it's in my main deck, I'd be siding it out for something a bit more effective, like a Ghost Spell. Blue Eyes, the best target you could possibly hit with this is going to be the True Light. Now, Blue Eyes veterans or Blue Eyes players will know to play around Ghost Ogre as much as possible and will try not to use True Light, or will use it as early as possible to set a wishes if they need it. And that's when you need to combo off or compare, combo off your Ghost Ogre with another hand trap, because then what you'll be doing is you just get rid of True Light. True Light will then destroy your opponent's field, and that's really going to cause them a lot of issues. So it's great against True Light. That's the one point that I'd be targeting with it. I'd wait for them to use True Light, and if they're being very cautious and don't use True Light, that's absolutely fine, because then I've still got Ghost Ogre ready to go during my opponent's turn. Moving on to the next one. So with the Lunar Lights are a bit of a weird one on this one. So you could very easily Ghost Ogre their scales when they're trying to activate the effects to fuse or revive from the graveyard, which can be quite useful. But remember, the Tiger has a destruction effect, whereas the Wolf doesn't. And even then, that being said, there are ways that they can recycle those particular cards, but more times than not, they want their Wolf on the field so that they can return it to the hand with their stuff like the Perfume Dancer and the Yellow Martin in the graveyard. So Ghost Ogre them and getting them stuck in the extra deck can actually be quite damaging for them. So it's actually quite a good option to use, but it's also one of the ones where I wouldn't rely on it that heavily, because Lunar Lights naturally will have more ways to fusion something. They don't just need Wolf, they need Wolf to get the double Liger Dancer play, but they do have other cards that will let them get to the double Liger Dancer without even needing to worry. Moving on to the next one. So the next one is basically Imperm and Veiler. They're pretty much the same cards. Obviously, they both have benefits and cons, but I'm going to take you through as just the overall target negate elements itself. So for the target negate elements in regards to like the yummies and everything else like that, your Imperm can be a good trade-off against a, like if you're going second, it could be a good trade-off during the draw phase to deal with a Snatchy. It can also be a good trade-off during the draw phase to deal with a Herald of the Art Light. The flip side of something like that is Veiler can only be used during your opponent's turn, and when it is used, it has to be used without the Herald of the Art Light being on the field. Yes, of course, you could Veiler the Cup to Yummy, but you'll need to combat that off. The exact same with an Imperm, you'll need to combat that off with like a Nibiru, or you're trying to stop their extension plays. So if you're trying to go Reaper into, or something like a Contact C, for example, to stop them getting more materials on the field, you'll need to combat that off with an Effect Veiler. It's overall still kind of a good card because you are still able to hit stuff like the Cupsy Star. You're able to trade it off with the Snatchy. You're able to Effect Veiler the Synchro if they try to Synchro tag out during their turn. So there are ways that it can be, or both of these can be quite effective for you. So it's one of the ones that's worth playing. Now, when we're looking at the Canine variants in regards to stuff like this, now, the Vanquish Cells is one of the best ways of being able to dodge targeted effects because they usually end up having a Borger in the hand or a Caesar Valius, and they just go, cool, target, return the monster, and then because the target fizzles, they still get the effect to resolve. So it's not overall effective in regards to the direct variant for the Vanquish Cells. That being said, being able to Imperm a Ripper can be quite useful. Being able to Effect Veiler a Lupus can be quite effective for you. And then one of the more commonly things you might want to be Imperming and Veilerin is going to be the Dice Smasher, because Dice Smasher seems to be one of those attempted, not guaranteed, but attempted auto win cons where they just go, cool, Dice Smasher with 3 materials, guaranteed to try and turn skip you, and you're able to go, no, Effect Veiler or Imperm, and you stop it happening all over. Imperm and Veiler against the Dracotals. And this is actually really good because, as I mentioned previously with stuff like Ghost Ogres and Ghost Bells, when they're trying to build their Artheon chain, they're always chain blocking the Artheon. I've never really seen a Dracotal player put Artheon as like chain link free because that's one of the easiest ones to hit with a Ghost Bell or any way like a Ghost Ogre or anything like that. So it's usually going to be Artheon chain link 1. One of the very few cards to get past that is a targeted effect, stuff like Imperm and Veiler. Now, there may be ways that they could fuse off the Artheon to try and make it resolve if they do have a Femena, as that's really the only quick play card that they have, unless they already have a Mululu or a Cartasia on the field, and if they do have that, then you're probably not going to activate your Imperm or the Veiler. That being said, Artheon is still a very, very good target because I've already mentioned that when they're trying to make that going first, more times than not, they're being able to loot back 1, 2, maybe even 3 cards from the graveyard, and that's their resource good to go again. Especially if you're in the Malice matchup and you've already dropped an Artifact Lancer against them, they're probably going to want to try and loop that Artifact Lancer against you again, so you want to make sure that doesn't happen. So against them, I think it's a good option on that one. Moving into Malice. Now, Malice, I actually think it has a little bit more effectiveness against all of the other hand traps on this one, for the pure fact that if you were to Veiler or Imperm the Dormouse, that could stump them depending on what else they have. What I mean by that is, if you're able to combo off an Imperm and a Veiler with something like a Ghost Bell to stop the March Hare Extender, you can actually end their turn. Now remember, they still have backup Secretary, they still have Wizard as well that can both help them extend, but when you're comboing off an Imperm or a Veiler with something that will stop them either going into a Link Summon or just stopping them going in to access more of their cards, that's going to where you're going to get the most advantage from it. So that being said, I still think that Imperm and Veiler are a good choice on this one. Even if you were to Imperm or Veiler Red Ransom or Imperm and Veiler the White Binder, trying to stop them at those particular points can be very, very effective. Mitsurugi Raizu, and the Mitsurugi Raizu is a bit of an interesting one on this one because you can't really stop the Habakuri summon because the Habakuri will summon and tribute off, so it already dodges that particular effect. If you're trying to Imperm any of the Mitsurugi monsters, they can very easily chain the prayers and tribute off and get rid of it, so again, quite like Vanquish Soul, it can dodge. On top of that as well is when you're trying to consider it against a trade-off for Detonator, you could Veiler Detonator during your opponent's turn if you're trying to activate effects against them. But then you could also activate Imperm during the draw phase of your turn or during the main phase of your turn, and that will trade off with the Detonator as well. So there are ways to stop the Detonator being as effective, and ultimately what you're doing, quite like the rest of these, when you're just trading directly for Detonator, again, I feel that there are probably more effective cards in the deck to utilize, but that's probably when your side deck's going to come into it and you'll be like, right, well, I want to deal with Detonator, I'm going to put in a Reaper rather than an Imperm, or something along those particular lines. Moving into Fiendsmith. Now, Fiendsmith is still an interesting one on this one because, again, quite like the Ghost Ogre, you're probably going to be trying to trade with the Lacrima. You're probably going to be trying to negate that, but you're going to trade off with the Caesar as well. Like, you can Imperm the Caesar, you could Veiler the Caesar if they're trying to stop you summoning during their turn, which is probably going to be a little bit more relevant when you're looking at stuff like your K9 Lupus and your K9 Azuna, and then your Feymana as well. They're cards that your opponent's Caesar will try and stop you getting to. So that's definitely where it'll be a little bit more effective. And what you're doing with these cards is you're trading one for one. So it's definitely better than a Red X, but it's just one of the ones where, again, you're trading one for ones. You might have, once you enter your side deck, more effective cards that will be a bit better for you. Moving into Imperm, I think it's okay, for Blue Eyes, sorry. I think this is okay, purely for the fact is that if you Imperm their Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon, they're no longer Dragon Locked, so they can just find other ways around it. If you Imperm or Veiler the Sage, they just go, cool, go into the Blue Eyes Link 1. Like, you're not really stopping them with an Imperm or a Veiler. Like, an Imperm can still be effective, but remember, you're going to be trying to use it against Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon, and at the point that you're trying to Imperm the Spirit Dragon, they're probably going to have the Blue Eyes Neo Dragon in the graveyard, so they can banish it and protect from targeting. So, overall, it's a bit meh. Like, there are cards you can hit with it. I'm not saying you couldn't, but again, it's one of the ones that if I see it in my main deck, I'm not going to worry. I'm going to know what I need to target. But when I go to the side deck, I'll probably be subbing it out for something like a Ghost Ogre, which is going to be more effective for me. So I'm not going to spend much time on the Lunalights because I feel like this is pretty straightforward and simple on this one. Yes, there are some good targets to hit with Imperms and Veilers and everything else in betweens, but really they're just going to have more resource to push for it. It's not like an Imperm or a Veiler at the right particular time just stops their turns or stops their plays or combo it off with a particular hand trap will stop them building. They're just going to have so many one card combos that allows them to extend that little bit further. That again, it's one of the ones that when I look at my side deck, I'm probably going to be taking out Imperms and Veilers, and I might consider putting in Draw and Lockbirds, which are going to be more effective as an all-rounder, stop your play, and then not allow you to get to the Ligan answer. So, moving on to the next section of hand traps. So as you can see, the board resets, or the field resets, and we're now going to be talking about 5 more different hand traps. Now, I might have overestimated how long these videos are going to be, but I'm hoping that these are going to be very informative, and whether you watch these as a video, or whether you just listen to these as a podcast, you get information leading up to the UK Open and thereafter. So, let's talk about the chummies. So, I'm going to talk about all 3 of the chummies on this one. I'm going to talk through which one's going to be the most effective of each one of them against particular matchups. So you've got your Fluilos, which is if you summon from the main deck or the extra deck, your opponent draws a card. You've got Perulia, if they summon from the hand, you draw a card. You've got Meowis, if they summon from the banishment or the graveyard, you draw a card. So, against Yummy, what do Yummy like to do? So Yummy like to summon from the deck with Obedient School. They like to summon from the extra deck with Yummy Snatchy and their Synchro plays and Herald of the Art Light. They also like to summon from the hand a lot by extending with their Yummy Cookie, their Lollipop, and of course their Cookie. So both Fluoros and Perulia are very, very effective. I feel that you can guarantee more advantage off of them by going with the Fluoros, but if you're able to compare both of them, then you'll get a massive amount of advantage. More times than not, the Yummy player will probably stop a little bit shy. Now, if they activate Obedient School, you're guaranteed to get 2 plays because there's no way your opponent is going Obedient School and then just leaving 3 Yummy monsters on the field. They're definitely turning one of those into a Snatchy. So that's how you're going to be able to get a draw 2. With Perulia, usually what they'll do is they'll go normal summon down Cupsy, turn it into, like, you have to drop Perulia during draw phase. They'll go, okay, cool. Normal summon down Cupsy, turn it into Snatchy, you get 1 draw, and they'll end the turn on like a Snatchy plus some back row, whether that be strikes, warnings, you name it. Meowis, Yes, technically Meowth can be used for you, but you would have to have an empty field, and then during your turn, during your draw phase, you drop the Meowth so that when they use their Synchros to bring back from the graveyard, you get to draw a card. And more times than not, they probably end up using 1 if not 2 Synchros during your turn, so you'll be able to get like 1 if not 2, maybe even 3 draws. So Meowth can be quite effective for you, but it's one of the ones that you have to hold it, you have to put it in there, and you have to make sure that you're not playing Canines or Dracotals that are going to be putting cards on your field. So with that one, I would prioritize Fluos, Perulia, and then Meowth. Canines. Now, this is going to be different depending on the variants. Now, what I mean by that is a Canine Vanquish Soul variant will give you a Zuna from the hand. It will give you your Raisin. Did I say Perulia? Yeah, so Perulia. So Zuna from the hand. You've also got Raisin, can be the normal summon. You've got the option of Rock summoning from the hand. You've got Holly Sue summoning from the hand. You've got Borgar, you've got Caesar Valius, you've got Jiaolong. So like there's loads that they can give you. They don't need to give you that because they know they have those capabilities to play during your turn, so they'll actually hold those back. When it comes to Fluolos, they probably don't need to go into it at all. Like, they don't need to go into Rock. They might go into Rock to give you 1 draw, but apart from that, they don't need to give you much more. Meowth, not really effective. Probably comes off the back of Rock, if anything, and more times than not, they'll just go cool Rock, add it back to the hand rather than summoning back to the field. So again, pros and cons on that one. When you're looking at stuff like the Crystron version, something along the lines of a Fluolos will be more effective than a Perulia and a Meowth, but they can both still be very, very good. But remember, through the Sulfurneer, Sulfurneer, but you're trying to get the Sulfurneer and Sulfurdor the right way around, but through the Sulfurneer, they summon from the deck, so that gives you 1 off the Fluolos. They'll have their extra deck summons if they're trying to give you their biggest end field, so that'll be like your Synchro summon plays they're going to make. Depending on what variant they're playing, they also have Ripper as well. So there are ways that they'll give you loads and loads of draws, but I think that the Fluolos is going to be more effective. So you'd go Fluolos, Perulia, and then Meowth. Dracotals. Now, Dracotals will try to fuse if it's during their first turn. When they activate Rahu Dragontail, you activate the Fluolos, that gives you a guaranteed draw. You could activate a Perulia during the draw phase. They may or may not give you a draw 1 because whether they need to use a Lucias or even need to use their normal summon will dictate it. If they don't want to give that draw, they don't have to use their normal summon. They have the ways to fuse through it. And that's where the Rahu Dragontail comes into play. Polymerization, King of the Swamp if they go down that route. They've got Cartesia that could technically activate Fusion Deployment to get her directly from the deck. So there are ways for that. They do have the ability to only fusion someone once from the extra deck or maybe go into the extra deck twice at most. So again, they're a little bit more controlled on what they do. They don't need to summon back from the graveyard. The only time they'll need to summon back from the graveyard is they want to use the Secturion Dragon or if they are trying to use a different variant of the deck like K9s. But even then, I think that your most effective would be your Fluolos, then Perulia, then Meowth. And even then, I think they're pretty average. It will still kind of hinder how much they push onto the field, but it's not an end-all be-all game ender if you do drop it on them, but you're still going to be playing it. Malice. I'm not going to spend huge amounts of time on this one, but you'd probably be looking at, if you could custom choose this one, you'd probably go Meowth, Fluolos, and Perulia. Perulia is going to be the least effective because the most you're going to get is their normal summon. You might get the backup Agnista and Wizard, but that really is just going to come down to how far they can extend. So being able to combo off a Perulia with a Fluolos is going to get you the most, or a Fluolos with a Meowth is going to get you the most. But again, you're definitely going to be playing them. Mitsurugi Raizel. Now, if it is specifically Mitsurugi, probably Fluolos is going to be your best one. Maybe Perulia, because you'll get like 1 or 2, but they can ritual summon from the deck. They can also, they don't need to give you as much. Meowth isn't that effective. Yes, they'll give you like 1 with a Murakumo, but not the end-all be-all. If it is the Raizel matchup, then definitely Perulia will be your most effective because all of the Raizels want to summon themselves from the hand. Fluolos would be the second best one, and then Meowth overall. So you're definitely going to be playing it. Moving into the Fiendsmith variants. Now, depending on the variant of this one as well, Fluolos is probably going to be your best bet because you have Requiem. Requiem would more times than not lead you either into Sequence or Nekoquip, and then you're going to be going to Caesar, so that's 3 draws. Then if you take into Mementos into account, the Mementos are going to be going through like 2, if not 3 monsters from the extra deck, so that's even more draws. The Perulia is not that important for the pure fact that they don't need to summon from their hand that effectively, like Tract, Lurry, discard, summon back from the graveyard, in graveyard, discard, summon back from the graveyard. Meowth is going to be more effective for you. So you're probably going to be looking at Fluolos, Meowth, and then Perulia. So again, big old green tick, you're definitely going to be playing it. Then moving on to Blue Eyes. Now, Blue Eyes is an interesting one on this one. So with Perulia, you could end up getting 3 draws, and what I mean by that is you could get a draw off of their normal summon, a draw off of their additional normal summon, and then you can get a draw off the Blue Eyes Spirit Link 1. Now, for you to get a draw off the Blue Eyes Spirit Link 1, something would have gone terribly wrong, because more times than not, the Blue Eyes player is not going to be giving you that. Fluoros can be quite useful because they'll want to turn their normal summon into the Blue Eyes Link 1, and then more times than not, they're either just going to end on a sphere, so you've got to draw 2 cards, or they're going to be working their way into something more along the lines of maybe a Spirit Dragon plus Seals, which gives you 3 draws. So that could be quite useful for you. A Meowis can be kind of useful for you for the pure fact that if they use the Blue Eyes Link 1, that can bring back from the graveyard. If they use Maiden, which 99.999% of the time they will do. And then they also have Roar with Eyes of Blue. So you can probably get like 2 to 3 on that one as well. So they're all relatively balanced, but the right Blue Eyes player will navigate around it to give you the minimum amount of draws where at all possible, but you're still going to play it. Loonlights, they're always going to go from the extra deck. You do get a normal summon if you want to. There are a couple of cards that they'll bring back from the graveyard. So all 3 of the chummies are going to be very, very effective for you. The biggest thing with the Loonlights is they're the only decks on this list that will take the Mole Chummy Challenge for the pure fact that is that if they feel that they are confident in being able to get to their Liga Dancer, they don't really care what you draw, because unless you are playing a Kaiju in the form of maybe like a K9 Vanquish Soul deck, they don't care. You could draw your entire deck, and if you can't out that Liga Dancer, they're not going to care. They could also very easily just end their field with 1, if not 2 Liga Dancers and go, cool, pass. And then you're like, cool, I've just drawn 20 cards. I've got to put all of them back, bar X amount. So you're still going to play it, but if you were to look at all of these decks up here, I would say like pure Mitsurugi and Loonlights is probably the one where you're going to get the least effect. Like you'll get huge amounts of draw advantage off of the back of the Loonlight one, but unless you're playing an out to their Liga Dancer, then not really going to worry. Drown Lockbird, I'm just going to move really quickly on this one. Drown Lockbird, not really good against Yummy. They'll do like 1 search, and then their second search can be chained after they do their first search, so Droll really won't be that effective. For the K9 variants, it really does come down to the variant of it. So when you're looking at stuff like Raisin, search out monster, you go Droll, that could be a little bit damaging for them. You've also got the Mad Love to get them access to the field spell. Again, Droll can be a little bit more effective against them. Christians, they don't really need to worry about it that much. Like there are ways that they could very easily play for it. And then the K9s themselves, they don't really need to do a lot of searching. So arguably you could probably say that Droll is a red cross rather than a meh grey, but I feel it does have some utilities in certain matchups. For the Dracotales, generally a grey card. Now what I mean by this one is it's all going to come down to the variant. So what I mean by that is the variant's already going to be, if they activate Beast to draw a card because they're playing the Shadol variant, and then they try and use they're going to want to use Lucias or Ketu, you can Droll off the back of that. But only if they go Ketu, search, and Droll. If they're worried about Droll, they search out the Moodaloo. If they're not respecting Droll, they go for the Lucias, and if you draw them, they might still have access to a Femena. So there are ways that they can still play through it. It's not a game ender with Droll, and they still have that ability to play during your turn, so it's okay. Malice, there's no real point in even doing it, because their 1 search after they do that, which is probably going to be their... Like, they might search out the March Hare first, but then the next search might be the field spell. They might already open it up. Like, the only time Droll is really good against them is if they start off with Terraforming, and even then, they still have plays to make. Like, Droll does not cut them off and end their turn. Mitsurugi Raizu, really, really good. Like, the biggest difference with this one is if they open up prayers, they're going to play during the draw phase. So if something on the upcoming Forbidden Limited list changes, it might be prayers just because of how effective that is of playing around Droll. But if they don't see prayers and they do their first search like Habakuri or they search out Habakuri, they activate Preparation of Rites, you Droll them, that's it. They're really going to start to struggle. That could also be said the same for the Ryzeal variant, because the Ryzeal variants are going to want to use Duo Drive and everything else in between. So you're pretty much shutting them down. Fiends with variants, I think it could be okay against Fiends with variants for the pure fact that if they start off with Engraver to search out Tract and you Droll them, that could be quite awkward. But if they start off with Tract, it doesn't make much of a difference because they go Track, add Lorry, discard Lorry, Chainlink 1, Lorry, Chainlink 2, Droll. They're like, okay, cool, whatever. Lorry comes back, Requiem into Lacrima send Engraver into coming back to the field, turn Lacrima into Nekoquip, overlay into a Caesar. Like, they still got to Caesar, and they still haven't even used the normal summon or anything else in between. So, depending on the variant, Droll can still be quite useful, which is why it's a grey meh than a red X. But ultimately, they would need to open up with very specific cards to do that. Moving into Blue Eyes, like, it can be very, very effective against Blue Eyes, but even then, it's not the end of the world. And what I mean by that is if they go... The only time it becomes an issue is if they haven't opened up well enough. So if they go Wishes and search out Sage of Eyes of Blue, and you go Droll, then the Sage is not going to get them the Maiden, and then you're hoping that they haven't already hard opened up the Maiden, because if they hard open up the Maiden, they just use it and then off they go. They get the True Light. True Light can revive a Blue Eyes. All they need to do is go normal summon, get their way into everything. It can be quite awkward to stop them getting access to certain components, but it's just not a game ender, which is why it's not a red X, it's more of a grey meh, because there are times when you can really shut them down, but a skilled Blue Eyes player will be able to navigate around it, especially if they're playing Primite. Like, I haven't even mentioned Primites on all these times I've played this, because the Primites aren't the weakest part of the deck. Like, that's not the part you're going to try and target. You're not going to try and imperm a Beryl, because the Beryl is just going to turn into Blue Eyes Link 1. That's where you're going to want to try and interact with them. That's when you're going to want to try and Ghost Ogre the field spell. That's where you're going to want to try and imperm the dragon, or Ash the dragon, the Link 1, or anything else like that. Loonlights, very, very good. Like, through testing a lot, Loonlights will prioritize a way to fusion summon in their first search. That being said, if you're able to stop them doing that, they then need to resort to sending cards from the deck to the grave and then adding them back from the graveyard to the hand. So again, it will take a very good, talented pilot with Loonlights in order to kind of navigate around and make sure that they can still loot that resource. But it does make everything a little bit more awkward for them. It does test their skills as a duelist for the Loonlight strategy, and that's really where you're going to get the most advantage from it. Moving on to Nibiru. Now, Nibiru against Yummies. Now, Yummies can play against it because they can just set themselves up with the Herald of the Arc Light. That being said, if they start off with Obedience Schooled, you better believe if you've got a rock in the hand, you're going to be smashing those cakes with that rock. You're not going to allow that to hit the field. You're going to go, cool, Nibiru, and off you go. So, Nibiru, big fat green tick. Against the Canine strategies, if they are a good pilot on that one, they're probably more times than not going to prioritize getting access to Ripper if they fear a Nibiru. And even if they don't get to that point, you Nibiru them, because they'll get you to a point where it's like, right, my next player is going to be Cyber Dragon Infinity, and you go, cool, Nibiru, they'll go, cool, Izuna, and off they play. So, meh. Like, you can catch a player out with it, but more times than not, they're either going to be able to protect from it or play for it. Dracotaz is a bit of an interesting one on this one as well, is that it can be very, very effective for you, because unless they are playing a specific variant like the Regenesis, or unless they're playing a variant like the Shadows, and for them to get access to a Monster Negate, they need to go into Shekanaga, and for them to get into Shekanaga, they need to hard open up either Polymerization with a Earth and a Shadow monster, or they need to open up Shadow Fusion with an Earth and a Shadow monster. So if they don't have that, they don't have a way to stop Nibiru. So in a pure variant, the only benefit you're going to get is you'll Nibiru them, but they'll play through your turn. So it's still good because it makes their infield a lot less effective, but it's not a game ender. So honestly, it probably rather than a green tick, it should be a grey circle, like a grey meh. But I feel that if they're going second and you're able to Nibiru them, you'll actually be able to survive a turn. And if you're able to stop their access, like you combo off Nibiru with other cards and stop their access to their recycle of Femina, they're not going to be able to play during your turn, and then you pretty much win the game from that point on. Against Malice, again, if the Malice pilot is good enough with the deck, they'll be able to play through a Nibiru. They'll put you in a position where it's like, right, Nibiru me now, or I'm going to be able to like carry on. That being said, in general, against Malice, you can really catch them out because they don't really have a direct protection from it. They don't really have a way to stop Nibiru apart from Dominus Impulse. If they have Dominus Impulse, that's just going to be the way the cookie crumbles and they're going to be able to stop it. So it's going to be a little bit more effective to stop it than the Dracotals, but it really comes down to the pilot and how they can respect it. Malice can very rarely play under Nibiru. They still want to try and get to their Link 3 at the very least. Once they get to the Link 3 of Red Ransom, they kind of feel a little bit more open to Nibiru because they're like, cool, Nibiru me, I'll still use the field spell and off I go. So they still have plays to make. It's not the end of the world, but it is still a card that could be very, very effective against them. Mitsurugi Raizu, I still think it's really, really good. Yes, of course, the Murakumo will still come back because he is tributed. The Detonator, if they are worried about Nibiru, they will play the Eclipse Twins and bring it back. But again, we've seen this before. What I'm trying to say about the three previous decks, so the Dracotals, the Malice, and the Mitsurugi Raizu with Nibiru, is if your opponent does not respect Nibiru, they will get hit with Nibiru and it will pretty much end their turn. Against the Fiendsmith variants, they just Caesar check it. They'll get to a point where their fifth summon or their sixth summon will be DDD High Wave King Caesar, and you're like, Nibiru me now, and then I play with all the other cards that I need, or don't Nibiru me, and I'm going to make Caesar, and I'm going to negate your rock. So against Blue Eyes, it can be very, very effective. A Blue Eyes player can navigate around it. They can still end their field with a Blue Eyes monster, because usually what some people will do if they're trying to play through a Nibiru is that they'll save the the Lordy Load summon from the deck, so that when you give them a Nibiru token, they'll activate Lordy Load to summon the Blue Eyes from the deck, and then straight away their Drill Beam's still online. And what you really need to be very careful about with the Blue Eyes is that their resource recurrence is going to be so good, because if they make it back to their standby phase, not only will they get the barrel back from the graveyard, but then when they get to the main phase, they normal summon down the barrel, they add the Drill Beam back, and they're just able to loop those back around. Not to mention they'll probably have Wishes in the graveyard, which will allow them to, and the Roar of the Blue Eye to allow them to fusion into a Tyrant Dragon, which means they're going to clear your field off. So there are just like loads of different options they can do with it. So it's meh. Like, a good pilot, again, can navigate through it and navigate around it. It can still be quite effective, but they have a lot more cards to guarantee their way. Like, they don't have to use True Light. They can save True Light. They don't have to use the Lordy Load to summon from the deck. If they do that, they're getting greedy or disrespecting Nibiru. If they feel that they can still play without it, they save them, they get nibbed, they continue to play. They don't get nibbed, the happy days, their infield is still very effective. Loonlights, I personally don't think it's worth it, for the pure fact that yes, you can Nibiru, but like I said before, a lot of the Lunalight cards need their monsters or want their monsters in the graveyard. So when you Nibiru them, you're not really doing a lot bar stopping them getting access to some like of their Link monsters. You're basically just going, cool, Nibiru, put your monster in the graveyard, and they'll still be able to go, cool, Wolf, Poly from the graveyard, like an answer. Like, it just really isn't that effective. Moving on to Phantasme. Phantasme against Yummy, really, really good. So they make Snatchy, you go cool, summon down Phantasme. If that wasn't enough as well, some of their Synchro monsters want to target your stuff. And when you're able to put Phantasme on the field, quite like Prankatops and quite like Fenrir, you already have a monster that is strong enough to deal with that Herald of the Arc Light. So if you're able to get Phantasme down before they make Herald of the Arc Light, which is more times than not going to be the case, not only can you sculpt your hand a little bit, you also have a monster on the field that allows you to discard a card to negate a targeted effect. Yes, of course, they can chain a Yummy effect to tag out or whatever, but more times than not, you're able to kind of trade one for one, deal with that disruption, or you just go, cool, battle phase, attack, and then when they try to use an effect to target to flip it face down so that it can't attack, you go, negate, carry on through the attack, and if they want to make sure that it resolves, they'll then utilize Herald of the Arc Light to negate it, or they need their field spell and rotation to make you a lot weaker and kind of move on from there. Against canines, no, not really. Like, Vanquisher is probably the only canine variant that will utilize a Link monster, and that's only going to get you one, and even then it's like, yeah, not really worth it. Dracotale, not really worth it. Like, the best they'll probably do is like an SP Little Knight, and even then most Dracotale builds right now are looking more towards the fusion variant than anything else. Malice, definitely. Like, all they want to do is Link summon. So you could be a little bit greedy and wait for them to get 2 Link monsters on the field, which does happen. Sometimes they'll even get 3 Link monsters on the field. And they do want to try and target your stuff as well. So there are times where they'll try and target your stuff and you can go, no, negate. So Phantasme, really, really great card against this. Mitsurugi Raizu, nope, no point. Then very rarely, if ever, going into to a Link monster. Things for variants, like you guarantee Requiem. Like 100% guarantee Requiem. The best thing about that one is if your opponent chains the Requiem, you still get the Phantasme, you just draw a card and you don't have to put a card back because they no longer... You draw cards equal to the Link ratings and then you put back to what they have left. So rather than you drawing 2 and putting 1 back, you just draw 1 because they don't have a Link monster on the field. But you still get the free Phantasme. So Blue Eyes will put 1, a guarantee will give you a Link monster. So it's okay. Like, they'll give you the Blue Eye Spirit Dragon. They don't need to target your stuff that much. So it's not as protective against that as it is with something like Yummy, but it's still kind of a good option for it. Lunalights, no point. Like, the best thing they'll do is they might make Cross Sheep, and when they make Cross Sheep, it's not a game, like, it's not, like, they're not going to target your stuff. Like, you're not, having target protection is not effective. Having a 2400 monster on the field is not that great. They'll just go Liger Dancer, blow it up. So the best thing you're going to do against them is, like, try and sculpt your hand if they go Cross Sheep, and if they don't go Cross Sheep, you've got a dragon stuck in your hand, not really doing anything for you. Carrying on, we're going into Bestials and DD Crows. Now, what I've done with this one is done it a little bit differently. Now, I'm going to talk about both of them, but I'll also kind of highlight which one is going to be more effective because some of these matchups don't have lights and darks in the graveyard that the Bestials can banish. So let's start with the Yummies. The Yummies are going to be lights in the graveyard. Both of these are going to be very, very effective against them because you can utilize them to sometimes banish the field spell from the graveyard, even though they will make ways to recycle them. You also have the ability to banish Snatchies from the graveyard when they're trying to be revived from the grave. You also have the way of being able to banish some of the other Cupsies and the Cookies, Cupsies, and Lollies from the graveyard when they're trying to be revived by the Synchros. Keep in mind that some of them don't target in the graveyard, so you're going to be just burning away some of their resource to make sure they don't come back to the field. So overall, it's kind of okay in doing it. You're better off trying to get rid of their graveyard completely, but it's just one of the ones that if you are able to burn away their resource, or you've already comboed these off with some other hand traps to minimize the amount of resource they can have in the graveyard, you can make their plays very, very awkward. So they're good options, probably more so leaning into DD Crow as we complete this line here, because you'll see how much more varied that is than the Bestials. Moving on to the K9 variant. So when we're looking at the K9 variants, again, straight away, Lupus, you get rid of that one. The K9s are going to struggle because that means they're not going to have their quick XZs during their turn. And then it also means that they're going to have a bit more awkwardness in order to try and make their Rippers or anything else in between. When you're looking at stuff like the Christrons and the Vanquish Souls will try and revive from the graveyard with Rock or add back from Rock, and sometimes that can be quite useful to get rid of that resource. When you're looking at the Christrons, being able to banish the Tristanos, again, this is where DD Crows could be a lot more effective for you than the Bestials, for the pure fact that you're able to get rid of one or two that are not light and dark attributes. And of course, you can hit spells and traps. If you want to get rid of the Graveyard Cluster, if you want to get rid of the Smygar, you have that option to do so. So in that one, DD Crow is going to be more superior than the Bestials, but it's still going to be quite an effective option. Moving on to the Dracotals. Now again, quite like the K9s, the DD Crow is going to be more effective for you for the pure fact that you're probably going to want to be targeting the Fey Mana. Getting rid of the Fey Mana can be very, very useful because that can be quite good to get rid of that resource, is that is the one card that's going to allow them to fuse during your turn. So that's when you want to be hitting the most. Urgula can still recycle the Lucias, but that's just going to be a follow-up for their next turn. So I wouldn't really waste it on an Urgula unless they don't have a Fey Mana in the graveyard. But being able to banish that Fey Mana when they're trying to revive it or target it with the Artheon can be massively important. Against Malice, personally, I wouldn't run either of these because they actually want their cards banished. It's one of the very few that want their stuff banished, and they actually have the ability to recycle all of their banished cards with the Heart's Crypta. So you're not really burning away most of their resources. You are pretty much just kind of giving them what they want. Moving into the Mitsurugi Ryzeals. So for the Mitsurugi Ryzeals, it's going to be it can be both of those. And what I mean by that is you're trying to hit the Habakuri. DD Crow can be more effective for the pure fact that DD Crow can also hit the Ritual Spell when they're trying to recycle it, which is why DD Crow will be a little bit more preferable. If you're like, do I go with Bestials or do I go with DD Crow? You're probably going to go with Crow over anything else. For the Ryzeal, there probably isn't like a dedicated card you want to be directly targeting. Like, they do have put a light card in the graveyard. They want to try and revive that. You can get rid of it. But honestly, you're probably going to be saving most of your resources for the Mitsurugis. For the Fiendsmiths, both will work. Fiendsmiths are a light-based attribute, so being able to hit the Engraver, being able to hit the Lacrima. DD Crow could be quite good on the Paradise when they're trying to go for Desiree. So you have loads of different targets on that one. You can get rid of the Lurry so they can't bring the Lurry back from the graveyard. For the Mementos, you can hit some of their targets as well when they're trying to revive from the grave. But some of those, or if not most of those, are lights and darks, so being able to utilize both is going to be very, very effective. Blue Eyes, again, both is going to be very, very effective in this one. Blue Eyes is, of course, light-based archetype. So being able to hit stuff like their Maiden can be quite useful for you. The Blue Eyes can really restrict them to having to summon the Blue Eyes from the hand if they have it in the hand. If they are specifically sent it from the deck to the grave and they don't have the way to do that, that could be quite useful. DD Crow could be quite useful to get rid of the Drill Beam. It could be quite useful to get rid of the Ether Beryl because that's an Earth and then a spell card. So you've got the benefits of both of that. For the Loonlights, again, both could be very, very useful. Loonlights do play a lot of darks. When they are specifically sending a card from their deck to the graveyard, whether it be through Foolish Burial for the Silverhound, whether it be a card that, like the Black Sheep that they're trying to add back from the graveyard, whether it even be Polymerization that they want to try and add back from the graveyard with stuff like the Kaleido Chick, being able to DD Crow or Bestial the Lights and Darks can be very, very damaging, and that will really stop their resource grind, and will really stop them being able to re-loop that Polymerization to ultimately get them to the end goal of the Lycanroc. So moving into our third and final section. Apologies, this video has been so long, but hopefully it has been massively informative. If you want to be seeing the Breaker version, which will be a lot shorter than this one because the Breakers are a little bit more direct, then please make sure you get the video above 50 likes in the first 24 hours, and I will bring that for you. So the next cards we're going to be looking at are going to be a little bit more specific. These are going to be cards that are going to be dictated mainly on how much you can use them in your deck. So when you're looking at Purge, you need to be able to play the specific attributes. When you're playing Impulse, again, you want to be playing those specific attributes. Lancer is going to be specific against very specific decks. Same for Retaliating Sea and Contact Sea. So for Dominus Purge, up against the Yummies, it's basically going to work its way the exact same as Ash Blossom. So pretty much they're going to have the exact same outcome as Ash from all of these. So it's going to be a bit meh. There are targets that you can hit. There are targets that can stop you. But In comparison to Ash Blossom will stop Obedient Stall because it summons, whereas the Purge will only stop the Cupsy. Now, the only benefit you get with the Purge is if you already have a trap card in your graveyard. So this is where technically your Impulse and your Purges are going to be better going second, because you would have had more chance to get a trap card in the graveyard. Otherwise, you're going to have to combo off an Imperm and then an Impulse. So bits and both. As Ash Blossom was good against the K9 strategy, you can get quite good at this one as well. So again, Raisin trying to add, get rid of it with the Impulse. Again, if you have the Purge, you get a little more effect of it. It's a little bit different from the Ghost Ogre, because again, Ghost Ogre lets it resolve, but then clears the body off the field. So pros and cons to that one. If they're trying to search with the Ripper, you can deal with it that way as well. Again, you're wanting another trap card in it to get the most advantage from it, because if you're able to negate and then destroy, which is something that Ash Blossom doesn't do and Ghost Ogre doesn't do, you'll get the most advantage from it. It can be actually quite good against Dracotail, especially when they're trying to use Ketu to add and then fuse. So if you stop the add, you stop the fuse, which can be really useful. You can also destroy, if you're able to destroy the Lucias, again, when they try to go normal summon Lucias search, destroy it, that can be quite effective for you. Again, if they feel that or know they're up against Yummy, they might try and play around the Dominus Purge a little bit more. So it's not end all be all, and it's still quite good. Malice, quite like Ash Blossom, there isn't enough searching for it to be worthwhile. Mitsurugi, you can hit the prayers, which can be quite devastating as well. You can hit the Duo Drive, you can hit the Habakuri. Sorry, not the Habakuri. You can hit the prayers, sorry. So any kind of card that wants to search, you hit them with the Dominus Purge, it can still be quite useful for you. For the Fiendsmith, you can hit Tract, you can hit Engraver. Less effective, like hitting the Tract is still good. It's basically the equivalent of an Ash Blossom, but again, it's not going to be the end-all be-all for the pure fact that they have that ability to still get into Requiem. Like, Ash Blossom stops Requiem, whereas Purge doesn't stop Requiem, so you're not going to get everything you need. Let me take into account Blue Eyes. So Blue Eyes in regards to Purge, again, you can stop it searching. If you're able to stop the search and destroy, again, just as effective. So if you're trying to stop the Sage of Eyes of Blue, again, destroying it that way can be very, very useful. It's the issue of having the two track cards. It's still a great card, no doubt about it, but you need to be pairing it off with a track card. Loonlights, again, bit meh. Yes, of course, there are cards that want to search. If you're able to stop the search of a poly with stuff like King of the Swamp, going back to the Feymana route, then the Dracotails, but then also being able to stop like the access to their fusion spell, it can be quite useful. But like the other hand traps, you want to be doubling this up with other cards. Different story. Let's move on to Dominus Impulse. Now, for the record, this is like one of my favorite cards ever printed. Like, I love the artwork of it. I think its effect's amazing, and I'm actually quite glad that it's as restrictive with the attributes as the rest. Like, it's a shame that it works for Dark decks, because Dark decks are probably like one of the bigger and more represented style decks. But then when you look at cards that can stop and interact with Dark decks a lot more, then it's a bit more balanced. But for Yummies, I'm not even going to spend long on this one, but like Dominus Impulse on its own, stopping a summon, insane. And add a trap card, destroy a card, brilliant. So Yummies, if they try to use Snatchy, if they try to use their Synchro Monster, like you hit either of those, that's it. And if you're able to destroy them on top of it, like the Synchro Monster, great, it goes back to the extra deck anyway. Snatchy, if you're able to destroy it, even better. Izuna, Lupus, Rock of the Vanquisher, Borga, Caesar Valius, Holly Sue, Tristanos, like all those particular cards, like you just completely shut them off. It's amazing. Rahu Dragontail, Ketu Dragontail, it's just insane. Like hitting the two important cards, and if they're on the Shaddoll version, Shaddoll Fusion, anything like that, it's just complete shutdown. Malice, still really kind of good if they're trying to use White Binder to come back from the graveyard, Red Ransom, Heart's Crypta, any of that trying to come back from the graveyard, you go, cool, Impulse. You've got basically any of their Malice cards that want to try and come back to the graveyard, you can hit those. And then any of their stuff like Splash Mage, if it's still being used, you've got the backup Agnista, you've got the Cyber's Wizard, like all of that stuff, you just go, no. Mitsurugi Raizuels, again, Ritual Spell, Prayers. You could hit some of the Raizuel monsters, but like they're still effective. Like it's still going to be a great card. Like there's no doubt about it. Lurry, Engraver, Requiem. Not much more needs to be said about that one. True Light, Blue Eyes Link 1, Blue Eyes Spirit, Maiden. Loonlights again. Polymerization, Heavy Poly, Wolf, Tiger, like all of that. You're just like stopping it. In some scenarios, stopping it and not destroying it, great. Sometimes you want to destroy it. Moving on to Retaliating Sea. Retaliating Sea, I'm not going to spend a huge amount on this one. It's not good against Yummy. So for those of you that don't know what Retaliating Sea is, it's a level 4 insect that basically says if your opponent uses a spell to special summon a monster, you can summon this card from your hand to your field. Any card sent from the graveyard is banished instead. So it relies on your opponent summoning monsters for a spell card and then them not wanting or like not wanting to lose their graveyard. Now Yummies don't want to lose their graveyard. The issue is the only card they use that is a spell card to summon a monster is Surprise, and they're probably going to already build a field by the time they want to use it, so not that great. Against Canines, Vanquish Souls, and Cristrons, the closest you can get is when Canines use the Quick Play spell to summon the Werewolf, and even then some builds aren't even playing that anymore. And then with the Vanquish Soul is when they use Stake Their Soul. So again, the consistency is very, very low. Vanquish Souls themselves used to play D-Shifter. They still play D-Shifter, so they don't really care about losing their graveyard. Canines don't want to lose their graveyard, but again, consistency to get there is not that great. Dracotales, completely different. Ketu Dragontail and Rahu Dragontail, both are spells that want to special summon. If they activate either one of those and then choose to fuse, more so with the Ketu choosing to fuse, but with the Rahu Dragontail, they're going to lose so much resource. Because what would happen is you go that, you chain the Retaliating Sea summons down, Rahu then fuses using a monster from the hand and the monster from the deck. They both get banished, so they won't get their set effects. You summon out Artheon, you summon out Glamel. Glamel's not going to be doing anything right now. Artheon's not really going to be doing anything. Like, you could bounce the Retaliating Sea back to your opponent's hand, but you just go again. So, like, you're not really doing a lot. So, absolutely insane. Malice, they don't care if their stuff gets banished. They don't even use spells to summon that much, if anything. Mitsurugi Raizu can actually be really good. They activate prayers to summon. If they activate the ritual spell to summon, you just go, cool, Retaliating Sea. And then all of the stuff that wants to be tributed and specifically go to the graveyard, the Murakumo, sending Agitator, everything else like that just gets shut off completely. Fiendsmith, they don't really use a spell to summon. Like, Tracked technically can fuse from the graveyard, but it's not the same as Ketu, so it doesn't utilize, it's not all in the same effect. So they just, like, don't get me wrong, if you can take away their graveyard, D-Shifter, great. I'm not going to put D-Shifter on the list because it's at 1 and only very specific decks can play it, and even then, the consistency of it is like an all-time low. Blue Eyes, again, they don't really use a spell. Like, you could use, like, chain it off the back of Roar of the Blue Eyes Dragon, but by the time they're activating Roar of the Blue Eyes Dragon, you're either putting them in a position where they have to use that early, or you're putting them in a position where they've already got enough on their field. Loonlight's amazing against it. If they want to use, keeping in mind that this will be done a little bit later on, like by the time they're trying to use a poly, like the earliest time you want to do it is if they use Perfume or if they use poly to go into the Perfume Dancer. As soon as they go into those, that's when you're going to shut them off, because then it means everything that Kaleido Chick can't send because it has to send as cost to the graveyard. They want to be banishing their cards from the graveyard to get into their Liga Dancer. You completely shut them off. So when you're looking at Retaliating Sea, it's like nearly a game winner against Dracotales, Mitsurugi Raizu, and the Loonlights, but against everything else, it's just like not useful at all. On the flip side, Contact Sea. Contact Sea against Yummy is a bit okay. Now, what I mean by that one is Contact Sea is a level 6 insect that summons to your opponent's side of the field. And when you do that, your opponent has to use it for a Link Summon, Xyz, Fusion, or Synchro. Like, they can't perform any of those summons without using that material. In the reason of Yummies, it means if they summon down drones and you then give them the Contact Sea, it means they can't go into Kagari, which can be quite useful. It still means they have their normal summon open, which means they can normal summon down the Cup Sea. They can then link off the Cup Sea plus the Contact Sea and go into a Cross Sheep if they are playing it. Some players are not playing it and they're using monsters that need 2 beasts or beast warriors or anything like that. So that can really stump them, which is why it's grey. But I feel that most players, like, they might get caught out by Contact Sea, but as you'll see with the rest of this list, Contact Sea is such a meh kind of card that you need to be putting it in because you expect to be facing nothing but Yummies, and then you might do very, very well, hoping that Yummies don't play any generic Link 2s that they can just link it off with. Going against the Canine strategies, this can actually be really good. Like, less so in the Vanquish Soul matchup because they don't need to go into Rock. But if you were to put this, maybe not so much against the Crystal matchup again, because if they get the right tuner on the field, they just sink it off. But the Canines themselves, like if your opponent goes Azuna in the hand, and you go, cool, summon down Azuna, chain link 1 to send from deck to grave, chain link 2, Contact Sea, you give them Contact Sea, you've got a level 6 on the field, which means they can't make an XZ. So they'll bring back the Lupus, and they can't XZs. So that's where it's really, really good. But in the other variants, then you're probably giving them fodder for what they need. The exact same can be said against the Dracotals. Like, there's no point in putting it in against them because they'll just go, oh, cool, thanks for the free fusion fodder. And the only time it'll ever be effective is if they go normal summon Lucias. And the only time it'll ever shut them off is if they go normal summon Lucias, attempt to use Rahu Dragontail. But more times than not, they'll probably go normal summon Lucias, search out Feymana to fuse. You can also use monsters from the field as well, so like you're not really doing anything. Sometimes it can be good against Malice. Maybe this should be a grey circle rather than a red circle, but this one is one of the ones where against Malice, if their link monsters are all have to use Cyverse, then you cause them issues. More times than not, they're playing like an SP Little Knight, so they'll just go, okay, cool, link off into an SP Little Knight, they've got their Cyverse, and then they just go, cool, Cyverse, link off we go. So it's not really going to end their turn. Mitsurugi Raizuos. Against the Mitsurugis, you're kind of giving them some ritual fodder. They'll find ways to get rid of it. It's not the end all be all. Against the Raizuos, it can be quite effective because then they're just sitting there with like loads of level 4s on the field. And they're then coming down to having to play a generic Link 2. And again, SP Little Knight is just such an incredibly powerful Link 2. It's so generic that a lot of people are playing it. The more times than not, what you're doing is you're giving them a Contact C to make their life easier to get to an SP Little Knight. So unless they XZs that lock themselves, and if they do that, more times than not, they've done it when they've activated a particular Raizuo, then you can go, cool, Contact C, and then you're forcing your opponent to try and tribute off that Contact C to get a little bit, like, to get going. So it's not an end-all be-all. It's kind of an okay, again, maybe a grey circle rather than a red circle, but you kind of get the idea. Fiendsmiths, again, it's not the end of the world, but the way that I would see it is if they went Lurry in Graveyard, something about Lurry, and you went Contact C, they'll just go, okay, cool, we'll just go into sequence. Or they'll just go, okay, cool, link off into an SP, still haven't used my normal summon, and off we go. Blue Eyes it can actually be really quite good against, because if you do this when they go into the Blue Eyes Link 1, they're locked into dragons. And if you give them Contact C, they can't link the Contact C off with the Blue Eyes Link 1 to go into an SP Little Knight. They can't go into a Hieratic Sealed. Like, there is no generic dragon that they can use to summon off the back of it. So they can't get rid of it. If they've already used their normal summon, the best thing they can do is additional normal summon and then try and go from there. The only downside is that some builds will play level 7 synchros that can be summoned off the back of Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon. If that is the case, then in theory, they could go one of their level 1 tuners plus the Contact C, make a Synchro 7. Very rare, but if your opponent was on one of them, a card like that, they could technically out it. Lunalights is, again, a bit mid on this one, and what I mean by that is they're probably more likely to be playing generic Link monsters like Cross Sheep. The biggest benefit is, though, however, is if you do this when they lock themselves into Lunalight monsters, that's when you really cause them an issue. So if they use the Silver Hound from the graveyard and summon out a Lunalight and you go, cool, give them Contact C, I don't think there is any Lunalight monster that requires a generic card. I think they all need Lunalight monsters, so then they can't play and can't move on. So Contact C in that scenario would actually be really good. So when you're looking at like Retaliating C and Contact C on the field, or like on the board here, you can see that Contact C is probably a little bit more balanced, but it's very weak against the 4 decks in the middle. Whereas with the Retaliating C, it's like weak, weak, really good, weak, pretty decent, weak, weak, really good. So like it's a bit more like that. Whereas again, Contact C is probably about the same, but it's a little bit more balanced along the line. Lancia, last one. We're going to blitz through this one. Very simple. Yummies, nope. It can be good against the K9 strategies. It's not good against Vanquish Soul. It's not good against pure K9s or like a smaller K9 Dracotal variant or anything like that. But against the Christian variant, it can make stuff very, very awkward. So probably should be a grey circle on this one. But you kind of get the idea that unless if you're putting it in for Malice, know that if you face Christian K9, you put it in. If you don't think you're going to be facing Christian K9 or Malice, you don't put it in. Dracotal, no. Malice, we know it's a turn skipper. Mitsurugis, no. Fiendsmith, no. Blue Eyes, no. Lunalights, it can be quite good against because Lunalights want to banish their stuff. Like Wolf wants to banish. That's how they get their fusion plays going. Like if you Lancia them, you make it so incredibly awkward for them to try and make their fusion plays. It really does cause them a lot of issues. So that is it for the entire video. I hope you have watched this. I hope this has given you huge amounts of information. I'm hoping you're watching this or listening to this on the backup. Just as a recap, so you can visually see on this one, this is all of the Purge, Impulse, Contact C, Retaliating C, Contact C, and Lancia. You've then got the Molchummies, the Drolls, Nibiru, Phantasme, DD Crow, and Bestials. And the last one is Ash, Ghost Bell, Reaper, Ghost Ogre, Imperm, and Veiler. Now, if you want to know my explanations of all of these, you'll have to listen to the video, otherwise we'll be here all day. If you just want to see a diagram of like where the colors coordinate, what is the most effective card and everything like that, you'll be able to see that from these 3 visuals. You can just pause the video and then kind of make your determination from there. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Apologies that it was such a long video, but like I said, hopefully it's got so much information in it, it kind of gives you everything you need leading up to the UK Open. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Like I said at the start of the video, get this video above 50 likes in the first 24 hours, and I will bring you the breaker video before we get to the UK Open as well. Anyway, thank you so much. Stay safe. See you at the UK Open. And of course, above all else, happy dueling.